All right. Sure, my sound is okay. Pretty decent, but it's not too crazy. Too loud. All right. Why still having stream? Some of this stuff I might not be able to fix, but okay. All right. I guess it's just silly. I'll just do it. All right. I'll cut all this stuff. Today, going discussing, which is a phenomena one parent turned the other child against. And obviously this is pretty tragic. Personally, I've dealt with parental estrangement, so I understand what it feels like to be connected from my. But obviously, this is for very different reasons. And I personally think that this podcaster, in this episode, like toxic, can almost like troubled good, and some of the challenges that can come with parental estrangement, kind of compared to transidentity, which I find, I guess, relatively problematic, a little irritating, mostly irritating. I feel like, but we'll spend some time navigating through this and um, seeing what type of insights we can come up with, and just yeah, I'll share my perspective on this topic. Well,
Many of these alienated children are non-binary.
Before she continues here, I want to
I just had to start. Like, of course, they started with that. I feel like that's important. I'm gonna slow this down a little bit. Sounds a little crazy. I want it to be like audible. All right. So start again.
What I'm noticing is a trend that many of these alienated children are non-binary.
before she
That's what happens. First non-binary.
continues here, I want to say that I've had a lot of parents reach out to me telling me that their child has now picked up a non-binary label. My child has now picked up the transgender ideology. The parents fear it's just a coping mechanism for their child. This makes a lot of sense to me, and I will explain why.
Of course it does. I love it.
It's Maddie with the anti.
It's super fun when cis people talk about the needs of transgender. They know a lot about that. By that I mean um very little. Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy take. But, let's see. I'm not gonna lie. When you toss in the whole non-binary thing like that, you're gonna get my attention. Okay? You're gonna peek my little non-binary ears are gonna be peaked. So yeah, that definitely caught my attention.
Alenation Project. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Here I talk about all things related to a certain form of child psychological abuse called parental alienation. This is a very severe form of abuse where one parent goes on an obsessive rampage and manipulates their child to reject their other loving parent without true justification. This happened to me starting around the age of 7 or 8 during my parents' divorce, solidifying during their divorce at age 9, and for the next 20 years, I rejected my dad. 2 years ago, I learned the truth. I had been made to believe lies and horror stories about him, like that he was abusive and that he doesn't love me, which was all told to me for years and years by my mom. Now I speak out about this form of abuse and hope to wake up other alienated children so that they can heal and rebuild their relationship with their targeted parents and create a wonderful lives for them.
I think this is great. I do appreciate this kind of thing. It is pretty tough to not have your parents, to not have both of your parents, or to be right, or to have a divorced parents at all, isolated from one of them, and to realize when you're an adult that you've been lied to your whole life. Yeah, that is pretty. That is pretty wild. I'm not gonna lie. Um, yeah. So, I mean, like I said, this is pretty upsetting, this whole situation, and I do feel for her. But some of the connections she makes are completely out of line, in my opinion.
themselves. Today, I want to dive into a deeply personal and complex topic that many parents have been approaching me about. In recent years, there's been a growing conversation about identity, and I've noticed something intriguing but also very concerning. I believe there is a potential link between parental alienation and children mistakenly believing that they are transgender or non-binary. Now, this is not about questioning anyone's
Excuse me, non-binary is transgender, so thank you. But yeah, if you typically, you know, understand what it means to be non-binary and you're non-binary because your gender identity and your sex don't align, like you're transgender. It's kind of the thing. If you're maybe like more of the non-binary gender non-conforming type and you don't identify as transgender, maybe that's what they're talking about, perhaps. But I do find that people outside of the community, any of the people inside of the community, really struggle with utilizing language for trans and non-binary people generally. And like even when I talk about it, like saying trans and binary people, um, it does definitely communicate that there is like a separate thing. I guess it's that maybe people want the non-binary thing to be specified. The trans people in my brain does include.
true gender identity, but rather understanding how intense abuse and psychological trauma can blur the lines for children and teenagers as they are trying to figure out who they are. Parental alienation is one of the most horrific forms of abuse that a child can experience. It twists and wrecks a child's self-perception and identity, as well as their perception of reality. For some of us, this confusion might extend into questioning our own identities in ways that we never could have imagined. If you're ready to delve into this very important conversation, hit that like button, subscribe. Peterson recently covered parental alienation in her podcast. I was reacting to her video, and about midway through the video, they began to discuss
Oh wait, I forget this part.
Peterson. I think he's all
Okay,
conversation. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get started. I love Jordan Peterson. I think
when I heard that, I was like, "Are you joking?" I'm just not a fan of him, and I think I'm mostly not a fan of him because of like his rhetoric around transgender people. Excuse me, I'm so yawny today. I'm not sure why. I don't know, slept too much, but yeah.
he's awesome. His wife, Tammy Peterson, recently covered parental alienation in her podcast. I was reacting to her video, and about midway through the video, they began to discuss alienated children and mistaken transgender ideologies. I'm going to start with that reaction video here, and then we're going to
Come on, ad blocker, don't fail me now. Damn it, I keep messing up. Whenever I do live streams, I'm very bad at. So,
delve deeper and deeper into this issue. Part of this podcast actually talks about the different social issues going on with parental alienation and the pushback by feminist organizations. I think I've covered that to death. So I'm going to skip over that part, and I'm going to go straight to the 45-minute mark, which is parental alienation, unpacking its complexity and the path forward.
Children have a natural right to their biological parents.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, because that's the first time I've heard someone from our institution say that. I'm glad to hear that. It's been, difficult, talking about boundaries with.
I think that I agree as well. Like parents, I don't know if about the right. I guess is maybe is an interesting word to use, but I really do believe that parents really have a deep connection with their parents. Does it need to be their biological parents all the time? I'm not exactly sure about that exactly. I think we need like loving caretakers mostly. Um, yeah, like if you were born, I mean, like for example, like adoption is difficult, like typically traumatic for. So we know that there can be negatives if a child, is not able to develop a connection with. So these things, like none of this stuff I can disagree are.
Women that always believe that they're victims because they've internalized that belief about them because they've been taught that their whole life. So part of what I'm doing with education is, not cutting them down, but educating women. And to make a change, I really believe we have to educate and help women. Like I have to help alienators too, and some alienators are men because they're my opponent, and I'm hoping that I can convert some of them.
And I think probably what's going on here is that some of the women, like maybe feminists, are saying, "Hey, we need to protect women from men, so that if these children are alienating the child from the toxic father, then that's like a positive." I don't know for a fact, but I'm curious. Again, I'm also agree issues probably with parents. Obviously, statistically, with things like violence and abuse, we understand a lot of times you're going to father's situation, heterosexual relationships. The father might be a child or something like that, but obviously, yeah, mention.
To do what's right for their children. I think.
Well, you got to uphill battle there, sister, but it's an admirable one. About women being victims, yeah, the victimhood mentality is certainly something that I have observed as a collective in society. Yeah, I think women have seen themselves as the victim. We've been told that we're the victim. We've been told that we need to portray that persona and that men are scary, men are abusive. I think all of this is intertwined.
But they just don't.
Once again, and also, I know that I'm doing like reactception right now, but hey, this is what we got. I thought this video was interesting. Her input was interesting, so I wanted to not go. I wanted to comment on it. All right, yeah, I'm actually gonna move on.
Don't know. Sometimes it's just no. And for some people that I tell the information.
Also, I will actually mention. So, um, I think it's important to understand that like women, maybe there's a like a theme of victimization among women, because a lot of women have, like, in the same way that people say that there's a theme of trans people, perhaps because trans people have been victimized for such a long time, um, and that can be very scary. It's concerning and uncomfortable. Um, but I do also understand how one should have a balance, or what it might be interesting to navigate a balance between understanding the concerns, but also having a healthy relationship. If you're, for um, well, I'll raise it up. Um, yeah. So if, like I said, it's important for women to feel more like empowered to have positive relationships. If a person is like, I legitimately am traumatized when I see men and hate them my core deeply, it might be like, okay, you could, does that, impact your life negatively? And like, maybe you might want to maybe it might be helpful to work through some of that. Um, and once again, understanding that, for example, feminism being for everyone, and are included. Some people might be upset about that, but oops, whatever. Okay.
Do, they get really angry with me and they will, become abusive, all the keyboard warrior stuff. But it's, that's part of my self-development, is learning to manage my own emotions in that situation. But
yeah, we're putting up boundaries, right?
Yeah. But, like, I'm going to have to blaspheme against a lot of the ideology. And I've done the work for 8 years. I've been obsessing about this topic, and I've talked to thousands of parents that are targeted. Okay. I have LGBT parents in my group, because the money doesn't matter. I mean, the money doesn't care what your immutable characteristic is. They don't care about the system doesn't care about your race.
This is another topic. What gender you are, your sexual orientation, your race, your class, whatever it is. No, there's no discrimination when it comes to abuse, when it comes to personality disorders. And to think otherwise would be doing a massive injustice to millions of children. Like I've always said on my project, anyone with a pulse can alienate. That is actually the only requirement when it comes to being able to alienate someone. You gotta have a pulse.
The system doesn't care about your orientation.
I think that's fair. Like I said, like, I not like interact with this person on the internet before. Like Tammy Peterson, for example, but might have other comments and stuff about her specifically, and like maybe I don't appreciate her outlook and her approach to things and stuff, and what she chooses to focus on, her content and stuff like that. Um, But yeah, we're gonna get to some of the other stuff soon.
Seems, and they're not so much focused on the actual nitty gritty of the abuse. I hope they do get into that though.
You can plan for the future, but you can take the next right step to get there.
Yes, that's what I do. That's what I've been doing for 8 years.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. Otherwise, it's too overwhelming.
Yes.
So do you think that both parents are responsible for the parental alienation?
I'm going to answer before she gets a chance to. Is the targeted parent to blame for the parental alienation? No. That's what makes it alienation, because the child has been manipulated to reject their loving parent without true justification. So these targeted parents know, I mean, they are flawed.
And I would say that what would make this accurate would say, like, if they're actually being alienated for no reason, then yeah, then because like that one parent could perhaps like do everything in their power to reinstate a relationship with their child, and at that point, you know, thing that they can. Yeah, exactly. Alienation and prejudice are not synonymous.
Individuals. I will say that. So am I. So is every person with a pulse. Even when you do have a targeted parent who has struggled with something in their life, they've made bigger mistakes. Like say you have a targeted parent who's had an alcoholism in the past. Is that alcoholism enough to say they don't love and don't deserve a relationship with their child? In my opinion, no.
Definitely. I think even if I would say that there are some situations for sure that like, completely cutting off the parent might be healthy, and maybe saying, hey, when you're 18, it's up to you to do X, Y, or Z type of a thing. But yeah, in a lot of ways, um, giving that child that really going to be there's like yeah, there's definitely a way to talk about like my wife's parents, and we talk about how like they might be able to say one thing about the other parent in a way that's like, hey, this parent hurt me pretty badly, and that's not your relationship with the person. So hey, you can kind of listen. And I would say that that's a really hard thing to do. Perhaps there was infidelity involved in a relationship. It can be really hard to be like, if you love me as a child, why would you also be in a relationship with someone who hurt me so badly? So yeah, this to me is yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's really in terms of like psychology, how easy it is to manipulate young children, how probably common these types of situations are, and then we also have to mention a lot of this stuff will people with like personality stuff will, and obviously people traumatized for a lot of reasons. Overarching alienation.
Alcoholism is an addiction, just like any other addiction. They need
Move forward a little bit.
and other mistakes that everybody makes, but parental obviously a victim. They are a victim here. It is like losing a child who is still alive. I cannot think of a greater pain. And I'm a mother myself, and I cannot think of a greater pain than that. So to tell the targeted parent, oh, you must have done something, or what did you do to make them not want to talk to you? I can understand if it's through misunderstanding, but if you're blaming the targeted parent on purpose, that you're just further abusing them. They did,
Yeah,
but it's
keep moving.
It's just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And like I said, the suicide issue is a very serious issue. Both mothers and fathers are killing themselves over this issue,
and children.
That's depressing.
The study that I read out of the University of Tasmania about former alienated children, which I done a video about, cited that the suicide rate for alienated children is above 30%.
Wow.
they're killing themselves every day. So that's what we've been trying to do is help these targeted mental health something more equitable, like an equal shared parenting default. I want to stop the profit motive, and I want to have children removed from severe alienators because it's the most horrific form of child abuse, and it creates lasting damage.
Thank you. Yes, she's right on the money there. She has really good ideas.
Very interesting stuff. Like, I just am wondering if does that mean that the parent who's doing the alienating, the child should be alienated from them? Is that, you know what I mean?
And
That's what
children
might be a
do
little
need to be
confusing.
removed. Absolutely.
Issue I wanted to bring up with you, we talked about this before, is the because I told you I've been through talking to thousands of people, and I have notes and like case studies. I've been obsessing with this for about hundreds of parents that I've taken detailed notes. And what I'm noticing is a trend that many of these alienated children are non-binary, and the research is.
Before she continues here, I want to say that I've had a lot of parents reach out to me telling me that their child has now picked up a non-binary label. My child has now picked up the transgender ideology. The parents fear it's just a coping mechanism for their child. This makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, so this makes not a lot of sense to me. I am very sympathetic to the mindset, but it also doesn't make sense. You are pairing like something as like natural and I don't know, as like, you know, kind of like variations within hair color type of a like you have to be able to like understand that these are very, very different situations. Um and there are some things that I will be able to make comments on in terms of like uh identity issues and stuff like that because I think there is something there, especially from like a therapeutic perspective. Um but yeah, maybe in my opinion a little bit of a man, dude. I was looking at Joe.
Transgender ideologies. I'm going to start with
All the way back.
suicide rate for right on the money there. She has really good ideas, and children do. Parents reach out to me telling me that they're adopted by their pathological parent. They're suicidal. Sometimes they're depressed, anxious, suffering with different physical ailments, often struggling with body image or body dysmorphia, which is similar to gender dysphoria. They're feeling really out of place.
Is body dysmorphia similar to gender dysphoria? I I understand why people consider these as similar situations or what similar struggles, I guess. But they're very separate issues. One has to do with like a distortion, like an inability to accurately perceive your own body. That's body dysmorphia. That like yeah, that's what's going on there. And if you have gender dysphoria, it's you fucking know. You understand what your body looks like. It just makes you upset. Yeah, very different thing. And if you're just saying like body insecurity, for example, body dissatisfaction, is gender dysphoria similar to body dissatisfaction? Definitely. But language here is important. I don't think helpful, especially if you're trying to be, I don't know. I'm not saying that she's trying to be like a mental health advocate, but is in the parental alienation, like talking about how this is hard people's mental health. Work on making sure you have accurately.
In their body.
1 second. Comment says I have a friend who's the most straight woman I know, and she's a victim to parental alienation. My parents are together, and I'm trans. Oh sure. You're probably not trans actually, because your parents are together. That's how it happens. You must be alienated in order to be trans. That's the rule. Too bad. Too bad. All right.
Really out of touch with themselves and their emotions. And for someone whose hormones are raging in the teenage years, I can totally understand why an alienated teen or child might think there's something really wrong with me. They probably have that belief that there's something wrong and flawed with them, and they might migrate to something like the transgender ideology to try to make sense of themselves and find.
Oh my god, this is such a stretch. Like dye your hair. Okay. But um but no, I've heard this sentiment over and over and over again. It is all autistic kids are trans. Like trans is the new goth or non-binary goth, like just people being culturally sensitive. Um Now, this is where I think my opinion definitely shift from um I definitely like I definitely that there is something to the idea of people like adopting pronouns or some type of transgender label something due to for like peer pressure, feeling like belong within a social group or something like that. Um, yeah, and the experience that I've had is like, asking a person like, "Oh, hey, what are your pronouns?" Um, and being like, "Yeah, my pronouns are she and they." Being like, "Okay, cool. Like, what does using they them pronouns mean to you?" Like, inability to even communicate like what that meant to them, which I thought was very bizarre. Like, especially it, and like for example, the other thing too, like being disconnected and everything from your emotions. I don't necessarily obviously like people of all different types of emotional backgrounds, I guess, are trans. But you have to be incredibly self-aware, at least relatively self-aware and reflective to some extent to recognize, hey, there's something going on inside of me that's wrong. Let me see if there are some things that or X, Y, or Z. Um, but yeah.
Find a community and feel better, numb their pain. They're just trying.
Also, yeah, there are such better ways to numb your pain than to be non-binary or to be trans. Oh my god. Like, oh my god. It's just, yeah. I think that these parts really don't make sense to me because there are perhaps some rare situations in real life where becoming trans would be very popular, like very, I don't know, comfortable, sought after, whatever type. But the majority of the public, the majority of the world, I would say, is either not going to care, or like might be positive to neutral, like or might really be harmful about it, or bigoted, or kind of like ignorant. So you have to kind of be educating people about this difficult thing and having some awkward situations, having to deal with discomfort through the legal system. Like these things are not enjoyable for a lot of people. Um, and I would say not every trans person has to go through things, but a lot of them do. Why would you do me? It doesn't make sense. Feels unnecessary.
To survive. And I will insert a clip here of me going on the board and explaining the similarities between alienated kids and gender dysphoria.
Also, I think this is the worst example I've
so
ever seen in
first
my
I'm going to
life.
write out alienated children and their main symptoms. And this is coming from a study published by Suzanne
I also watched this very quickly earlier, so maybe if I pay attention a little better,
Mandy
eat my
Mathewson,
words.
and Caitlin Bentley. The study is titled The Impact of Parental Alienating Behaviors on the Mental Health of Adults Alienated in Childhood. It was published in 2022. I also want to mention that the information I'm getting about gender dysphoria is coming from the Mayo Clinic. Let's get started. So the first symptom that we have right off the bat for alienated kids would be really poor self-esteem. And that's true for transgender kids as well. We're gonna put that in the middle. Now,
Okay.
a really, really common symptom that you see in alienated kids is depression.
I don't disagree. If a lot of transgender individuals, may have poor,
or severe depression or suicidality. And unfortunately, depression and suicidality is very common for individuals experiencing gender dysphoria as well. So that's going to go in the middle too. Another really common thing for both alienated kids and kids with gender dysphoria is bad body image. It's also really common for alienated kids.
And then once again, I personally really think there's a lot of utility and function in the conversation of like origin of body image. That would be also the distinctions of like why they're depressed, what what kind of the result, like how the function of in my opinion, different. Just because two things provide like similar symptoms, it does not make them necessarily connected. Excuse me. Um, so trying to think, like a fever is a symptom of like a shit ton of different, but it doesn't make those two different conditions the same at all. what it does say is that they both are dealing with inflammation, and the inflammation probably is triggering your body to fight and fever. I think when your body is fighting, it's happening. Um, but the reason for what is causing issue is very, very. So if we just look at the symptoms and we're like, wow, these things must be the same, we can really miss out on a very important context. And okay, at least I hope that you guys can still hear audio when I forget to turn the screen. Pretty sure you can, but yeah, I wanted to I wanted to show you this because it's so like, okay, just wait.
To have eating disorders. It's also very common for kids and teenagers with gender dysphoria to develop eating disorders. So we're also going to put in the middle eating disorders. Another one I can add to the middle section would be self-harm.
I can tell you,
Okay. And that's the end of it. Like, okay, and so there's nothing about transgender identity that's unique. Not a single symptom for being trans. Not okay. Sorry, I don't know if you would have a symptom of trans identity, but I know you guys. Hopefully, you understand what I'm talking about, and also not me making a big fuss about having accurate language and fumbling the bag like massively right now. But yeah, yeah, there are similarities between these things. Okay, cool. Does that make them connected in any way? Good God, no. I really think that this is a bit of a stretch. Please.
Would be self-harm.
I can tell you anecdotally that this is true. What I think is happening is, as I told you about the identity crisis and the void these children feel inside them that have like been demonized, erased. You know, whatever your identity comes from your parents and the family stories.
Yes.
You talked about your rosary in.
Like, another thing that I'm thinking about is like gender is cool and all. But filling a void that your parents left, good God. Do you understand how empty you will still be? Like, you'll be very empty still. I guess they're not saying that these kids are making or are maybe finding good ways to fill in the void or whatever. I'm not gonna say that, but these are just very terrible ways. For example, fill in the void, parental alienation. Um, all being trans does, all it does, is like makes like situations in your life where either your gender or like your presented sex like is affected. It affects those things. And that is like a lot there. It could be, a lot of tangential things in your life, or could, and that's why I think, for example, work every day and you get gendered all day long, it can be very different if you stop getting misgendered because transition medically. Like, that is a big deal for some individuals. But then oftentimes the depression goes away because you treated the cause. For things like parental alienation, you've been lied to and manipulated your entire life. Like that's what's been happening. These are very, very, very different things. To me, it is a whisper to like, you're probably gay because you're probably trans because of abuse. And that narrative to me, probably, I'm just a sensitive trans person, probably. But whatever. That's what I think about that. That's all I have to say about that. I watched Forrest Gump.
You feel the strength of your family from generations, and then when you take that away from a child, there's just this vacuum. And so these children are coming up.
That's so crazy. I always loved to write and read. I even studied it in college, and my mom always told me from the time I was 9 years old, Madison, you're going to write a best-selling book one day, and it's going to be called The Hole in Your Heart, about why your dad doesn't love you. So it's like my mom, even though she put that hole in my heart, it's all.
Oh my God, how fucking toxic is that? Wow. Yeah, like really, really is giving parent who, yeah, is like very much projecting her reality onto child. Wow. I feel very bad. That sucks a lot.
Almost like she knew there was a void inside of me. Like she had created that void and she could sense
Oh,
that there was a void inside of me.
absolutely.
And I was never going to write that book, by the way. I always felt really uncomfortable whenever she would tell me that. But at the same time, I did feel this hole, this void.
And they say, well, I'm a dragon gender, I'm a unicorn gender, I'm a fiction kin, I'm a Harry Potter gender, and they make up all these genders trying to fill this void inside them.
That's what I was getting at a second ago. Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to feel good enough. They're trying to understand themselves. They're trying to make sense of who they are, because they don't freaking know who they are, because it's been their identity, which was once an authentic version of who they were born to be, has been replaced by their pathogenic parent. That is why it's like a cult of two, or however many people in the family, because their natural, authentic identity has been replaced, just like cult leaders will replace cult members' identities. So it absolutely makes sense to me why kids would navigate to try to find this labels for themselves.
It's not the child's fault, and they're so like ridiculed and humiliated online. And so not only is this child now traumatized from the alienation at home, being bullied.
Okay, so some other types of thoughts here. This one is actually like, my whole thing with like foreign gender and stuff like that is that most likely it's like either like like transgender people who may have like difficulties describing their experience of gender, getting very creative how with kind of the language to express it. um Gender is a weird thing. I think that it's like I said, it's mixtures of like culture, experience. Like I think also there are some types of like sex drivers of like our gender to be a lot of different things together, with gender itself as a being. um and I definitely like in my head oftentimes like gonna associate things like cat gender with like younger children. Number one, because of experience. Like I've like in my experience, I've never, for example, come across like a elder trans person who utilized that language for themselves. Um, and so that's probably why I have that opinion there. And it's not something that like I think has a lot of like utility in terms of like the general public. I think that it can be like a fun thing. Like it almost like I don't know, it kind of like can turn gender or sexuality in. Um, and then I think that there is maybe some capacity to um maybe more in the along the line of being reality, that type of thing. Um, and I think that we understand right? We understand it's between just like and for example, if you want to be a person who makes being gay your whole, that's how to do that. I also think that for anybody who makes personality, people might be for variety. Like if you go to the soccer game and all you want to do is talk about football, that might be a little bit for everybody who's wanting to watch football. That type of a thing. So, um, so yeah, um, yeah, I can understand the concern that parents would have if they start seeing stuff like this, and if I don't know, like I said, different types of signs of these types of things. Um, having a lot of being nerve wracked. Um, and I think there are give kids um room to be explored about their gender, ridicule for it at the time.
Like they're being abused at home, but then they have then they're being ridiculed and mocked. They're children, right? This is not an adult, and teenagers, right? And now they're being ridiculed online for trying to find coping mechanisms for their lost identity.
Right. This isn't the kid's fault. I have so much empathy and pain and sorrow for these children. One other thing I wanted to mention, like I said, it's very common for alienated children to have really bad body dysmorphia, self-esteem and body image issues. I remember being 11, 12, 13, going through the first stages of puberty, and I hated it. I was so freaked out. I hated it. I was not that girl who was excited to develop. Absolutely not. I wanted nothing to do with my developing body. I would be afraid that if that had been going on when I was a teenager, this transgender ideology, if that had been rampant in schools when I was a teenager and a pubescent girl, I might have thought to myself, well, dang, am I transgender? Because I don't like this. I don't want to be a woman. I don't want any of this. But it wasn't because I was having gender dysphoria. That's not what was going on. I just felt so absurdly uncomfortable in my own skin. And I think a lot of these kids feel absurdly uncomfortable in their own skin. So what did I do?
We definitely get to this part where there are nuances that get very important to talk about. Nuances that are important to talk about. Good God. I'm so bad at this, but I will get better eventually. There are nuances that I think make these things a little bit, like I said, for me to have more like sympathy to entertain the idea. Sure, like these things could happen to an individual. Like a person could be navigating their childhood, could be um, going through something like that, and have some questions. And I would definitely say that it would definitely be a shame. Like it'd be hard to deal with. Like for the person to have to a lot of really tough things to have to kind of like the end credit in the end. Like it'd be a frustrating thing, and at the same time, it would be are able to navigate the side being okay. I guess I don't necessarily like the cultural discussion around like trans stuff being some type of date happen to people. I understand that it's a little bit scary and like it should be taken seriously for sure. But yeah,
I do to cope? I started to try to control my body. I developed anorexia, and that was my coping mechanism. But a lot of these kids will turn towards transgenderism and try to change their gender as their coping mechanism or change their sexual orientation as their coping mechanism. And I also want to make one thing clear.
that that is to me is fucking crazy. I was kind of I don't know if I was waiting for that, but like what do you think happens? Like, do you think that you just go through a tough like you just have a tough day and then all of a sudden you're like, "What? I'm just going to be gay. I'm just going to switch gay real quick." I think that sounds like a good idea. Man, that'll just make my life, make me feel so much more fulfilled in my life. Like I don't yeah. I'm guessing like sure it could happen. Yeah, but at the same time, how many of those kids are actually like transgender and at the same time are just going through parental alienation and at the same time are having difficulties like, articulating their gender identity. So utilizing other type um the mic is cutting out. I don't know if that's bitrate related. Okay. For updating. Not actually that I'm not sure about at all. Okay. I think kind of oh crap. Okay, guys. Just so that I hear now I see what you're talking about. Not sure if I think this is okay. It seems to have stopped. Let's give that a try. All right.
clear before anyone gets the wrong idea. I am not saying that transgender people do not deserve to exist. I'm not saying that gender dysphoria doesn't exist. It does. It's horrible. I have so much empathy for people who struggle with that, and I don't want to get into the politics of transgenderism here. And I'm not saying anything about that. If someone was just trans with gender dysphoria truly has gender dysphoria, that is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about kids who've been through severe mind control and abuse, ongoing abuse, who, as a coping mechanism, as a survival mechanism, turn toward the transgender ideology to cope. But that is not what is truly going on with them.
They're actually being sterilized and mutilated too. From this fact-free ideology is now, and a lot of this is coming from the same people that deny PA.
Okay. I do think once again, this comes to like rhetoric and language. The creator, I don't necessarily have, I think, as much of an issue as I do, for example, like Tammy Peterson, right? Not a fan. And the language of things like trans surgeries are mutilating, to me is I guess pretty like, yes, pretty bigoted, just very rude, unkind, transphobic. Like if someone just like got a knee surgery or something, is their knee mutilated? There's a difference between, like getting a surgery, like having a botched surgery, for example. And that's a whole different situation. But that kind of language is problematic. Ooh. Okay. I also think I might not be sitting close enough to my mic. That might also be an issue.
Basically, a lot of this trans ideology, it's the same dangerous Marxist ideologues, a lot of these
What happened? Oh no. Wait. What?
radical feminists are pushing this ideology is now, and a lot of this is coming from the same people that deny PA, basically. A lot of this trans ideology, it's the same dangerous Marxist ideologues, a lot of these radical feminists are pushing this. And I think they're trying to cover up the special interest group of gendered violence. They're the ones pushing this trans ideology. I think they're trying to cover up the reactivity of these children, trying to say, well, they actually are these, bizarre identities, these bizarre,
right,
non-binary. So that's what my thesis.
Okay. Did you see how fast this turned? Anybody see how fast that just turned? We went from this conversation that actually might have had some function, some utility. Hey, there might be the rare situation where a child is being manipulated by their parent and it is causing some, real problems mentally, and they are really having a tough time, and so they look around to try to find some other identity thing to make them feel better or whatever. To me, sure, like I said, sure, that can happen, that could exist, whatever, but I just doubt it significantly. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. All right, just checking the message. All right, so I really want to spend a beat chatting through this because they went so fast. Okay. Okay, cool. I don't know what that means though. I mean, yeah, I was there, which is okay. So like I said, I wanted to spend a beat like talking about this the weird, like, I don't know. It was normal at first, and then you went into like conspiracy land. First it was, I'm concerned for these kids, like real concern, okay. But then it's the conspiracy of the feminist ideologues and the Marxists who who are trying to push all the children to believe that they're trans. And I'm not sure I'm trying to see if I can hear for what reason.
This is on this, and because of this,
me put it back a little
the
bit.
special interest group of gendered violence, they're the ones pushing this trans ideology. I think they're trying to cover up the reactivity of these children, trying to say, well, they actually are these, bizarre identities, these bizarre
Right.
non-binary. So that's what my thesis is on this. And because of this, I'm sure you can imagine how controversial this is. And
I guess I'm having, maybe I don't know enough about her talk to even get this right now.
and a lot of
Let me
parents
just try one more
trying
time.
to cover up the
as a survival mechanism, turn toward going on with them.
they're actually being sterilized and mutilated too. From this fact-free ideology is now, and a lot of this is coming from the same people that deny PA. Basically, a lot of this trans ideology, it's the same dangerous Marxist ideologues.
Hold on, I want to check to see, what did they just call it? I'm gonna move this out of this. What did they just call it? Move PA?
A lot of these radical feminists are pushing this, and I think they're trying to cover up. And a lot of this is coming from the same people that deny PA. Basically, a lot of this trans ideology, it's the same dangerous Marxist ideologues. A lot of these radical feminists are pushing this, and I think they're trying to cover up the special interest group of gendered violence. They're the ones pushing the trans ideology. I think they're trying to cover up the reactivity of these children. Trying to say, well, they actually are these, bizarre identities, these bizarre
Right.
non-binary. So that's what my thesis is on this. And because of this, I'm sure you can imagine how controversial this is. And and a lot of parents have.
I can't find anything, at least with a short Google search, that shows exactly what she's talking about. But right, Anima just mentioned this person is indoctrinated. Yeah,
I've gotten angry with me when
yeah, like I said, did you just watch how quickly it moved from we're having a conversation and obviously maybe there is some bias. I think there comes with some bias as well. Like people, as soon as someone hears a trans something, they're like, oh, what does that mean? It kind of sparks attention in the first place, which is obviously fine. For a person to have to be trans or whatever, that's not a bad thing in itself. I think that the process can be frustrating or challenging for a lot of people, and that can be hard. But
the reactivity of these children, trying to say, well, they actually are these, bizarre identities, these bizarre
Right.
non-binary. So that's what my thesis is on this. And because of this, I'm sure you can imagine how controversial this is. And and a lot of parents have gotten angry with me when I.
Thank you. Wrong and controversial are not analogous. Right. I really do think that there are some people who believe that.
First pointed this out to.
Oops. That they bitch. There are some people who believe that if what they're believing is, subversive, culturally subversive, they're onto something. I think they really believe that they're onto something. But I don't see it. You can sometimes just be wrong. Flat earthers, best example.
To them, and
No, creationists, better example.
I told them the truth because I try to stand by my integrity and tell the truth and educate people. But people have come back.
And by the way, standing by her integrity means regurgitating indoctrinated points from whoever, all the people who believe that the Marxists, feminists, I don't know, are taking over the world, I guess. Look at the planet and tell me the Marxist feminists are taking over the world, please.
Back to me and agreed with me, and they're standing behind me they know that I'm on this podcast saying this right now.
But yeah, I know it's very controversial. I'll probably lose a bunch of subscribers and get heat in the comments for even making this video. So there are a lot of people.
I mean, hey, you did, parrot some pretty idiotic positions that aren't really based in reality. And yeah.
Well, kids who go through trauma and abuse and they kind of wander to the transgender ideology as a coping mechanism. And for an alienated kid, their life is hell on earth as it is. Add in the transgender ideology, and I've heard of this too, where you have a lot of alienators who are encouraging their alienated children to be a different gender, or they're even imposing it on them as a form of Munchausen by proxy, which, oh my God, doesn't even surprise me because there's a very common, close link between severe alienators and parents who commit Munchausen by proxy. They're both forms of a factitious delusional belief system imposed on the child. These people are not living on this planet. They are somewhere else entirely.
Parents that used to, be
Sorry,
angry with
guys.
me